Just when should you get out of your wide receiver shares in Dynasty football? That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. Before we start, if you could please like this video and subscribe to the channel, that would be fantastic. We are back with another research style video. I'm really enjoying doing these type of videos where you kind of delve into the numbers a little bit. I put out several videos that you guys can see on the channel, kind of going into, just some of the other videos where I went into the Anthony Richardson and the Colts and what to expect from the passing game, wide receiver age, and running back age, and just how important really is it, or is there something else we should be looking at? Jonathan Taylor, looking at him. I did a tight end video that will be dropping today, actually. So I'm just really enjoying these research style videos, and I'm going to continue to be dropping these videos definitely up until the season starts. And then when the season starts, we'll be focusing a little bit more on what's actually happening in the season. But today I've decided to kind of look at some just kind of when to get out of wide receivers, right? First round, second round receivers, specifically Dynasty football. These guys are super, super valuable. They're always being drafted in the first and second rounds. And is there kind of a signpost that tells us, it's probably time to get out of this receiver? It's just not going to happen. So I decided to go back and look at first and second round receivers drafted since the year 2000. And of those receivers that were drafted in the first or second round, how many of them failed to reach 750 yards their first two seasons in the league? Now, this takes into account all guys injured, suspended, played 16 games and just couldn't get to 750 yards. Takes into the whole spectrum of guys. I was just really curious as to just how many receivers who fail to get to 750 yards their first two seasons, how many of them actually pan out and do something in the NFL fantasy wise, right? So I was a little surprised when I started getting into the numbers. Again, this is since the year 2000. So from 2000 to 2021, really, because the 2022 class, they've only played one season. There's actually been 120 receivers. Let me get a better angle here. 120 receivers, as you can see here, that have been drafted in the first or second round that have failed to put up 750 yards in both their first and second year, which to me was like, wow, that seems like a lot. And when you do the math, 24 years we're looking at, right? If I did the math right there, or 23 maybe, but you're looking at about basically 5 receivers a year that are drafted in the first or second round that fail to put up 750 yards. That just seemed kind of crazy to me. So I really, really wanted to look at just, are these receivers actually doing anything after that? You can see here the breakdown. First round receivers, there's 45 first round receivers since 2000 that have failed to reach 750 yards the first 2 years. 21 have been drafted between picks 33 and 40. There's kind of been a lot of research coming out basically saying we shouldn't just look at first round receivers. We should look at top 40 pick receivers. That really, if you're drafted in that top 40, there's a lot of value there, especially for Dynasty football. Receivers that are drafted in the top 40, there's a separation between those and the guys drafted outside the top 40. So there's 21 more of those. So basically 66 receivers drafted in the top 40 have failed to reach 750 yards the first 2 years. And then another 54 that were drafted in the rest of the second round, picks 41 through 64. So really, really interesting stuff here. And you can see the breakdown right here. Only 14 receivers that did not put up 750 yards in their first 2 years, only 14 of them ended up putting up multiple top 24 seasons after their second year. So only 14 out of 120, guys. That's 12.5%. I think that's even lower. I think I did the math wrong there. I'm just doing it right now. That's actually 11. I'm going to change this here. 11.5% of the receivers that were drafted this high actually went on to put up multiple top 24 PPR seasons. 14 more of them, which is another 11.5%, 14 more of those guys put up one top 24 season. So basically you have 28 receivers who were drafted in the first and second round who failed to put up 750 yards their first two seasons. Only 28 of them had a top 24 season. 14 of those had one, another 14 had multiple. No top 24 seasons, 92 of them, 77% of the receivers failed to put up top 24 seasons. They're basically either out of the league, just were kind of mediocre receivers and never had a good season, whatever, got injured. There's a lot of different reasons. And then I decided to look at, okay, how many guys are putting up top 12 seasons? Because those are the guys that are kind of winning leagues. 17 of the 28 that put up top 24 seasons actually put up top 12 seasons. So that's actually a pretty decent number of those guys that are finishing in the top 24. Just kind of crazy numbers to me, in my opinion. Very, very crazy numbers. Just when is it time to get out of your shares of your wide receivers? We're going to talk about that in today's video. Before we do, if you could please like the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be fantastic. We're going to be putting out content all year long. We're back today with another research style video. I've been really enjoying these. I have several coming out. I have a tight end one that's dropping today. We did a Jonathan Taylor, looked at Jonathan Taylor. We looked at age into running backs, and is it really age or is it more the amount of carries they have? So we have a lot of these kind of research style videos that we have that I'll keep putting out basically until the season starts. And then that will be, during the season, will be more focused on what's happening in the actual season. But really, really enjoying these just to kind of make us better fantasy players, more knowledgeable, kind of minimizing the risk. I think that's kind of what fantasy is really all about. No one can really predict what's going to happen. You look at the experts and their projections, and you're lucky if you get 50% of what you said right. That's like a really good season. So to me, it's all about how can we minimize risks, right? How can we go for, all right, this is the best chance. Is it going to work out this way? Maybe not, but this is the best odds. It's like gambling, right? When you play 21, you want to give yourself the best odds. Does it work out all the time? No, but you want to give yourself the best odds. So in today's video, this is kind of a little bit more focused towards Dynasty, but it can be used in redraft football as well. But basically, it's talking about looking at receivers since the year 2000 that were drafted in the first or second round that failed to put up 750 yards in their first 2 years. Okay. So again, receivers drafted since the year 2000 in either the first or second round that failed to put up 750 yards in either year one or year two, not combined. They had to get 750 total in one of those seasons. And I was actually surprised when I started looking at the numbers here, guys. I'm going to share my screen here with you. So you can check it out a little better. If you look here, there have been 120 receivers since the year 2000 that have failed to put up 750 yards in either of their first two seasons that were drafted in the first or second round. That seems really high to me, kind of crazy, right? I think it comes out to about five receivers a year basically failed to put up 750 yards their first 2 years, which is insane, which just shows you how hard it is to be good elite in the NFL. It's really, really a very small percentage of players that get to that elite level. So many receivers drafted that I was going through this list and just like, man, I've never heard of these guys because even though they were drafted first, second round, they never did anything. So 45, we have 45 receivers that were drafted in the first round. And then I decided to break down the second round between, 33 through 40. There's a lot of research coming out basically saying like, it's not just first round receivers that are hitting at a pretty high rate in the NFL. It's actually top 40 players. So even the guys drafted in the second round, in the first 10 picks or so, 7-8 picks of the second round, they're also hitting at a high rate. So we have 21 more of those. So 66 receivers drafted in the top 40 failed to put up 750 yards in their first two seasons, in either of their first two seasons, and then 54 more between picks 41 and 64. You can see the breakdown here, guys. Of those receivers that failed to put up 750 yards each of their first two seasons, or at least once in their first two seasons, only 14 of those, 14 put up multiple top 24 seasons after their second year in the league. Only 14, guys. That's 11.5% of the receivers went on to actually be relevant in fantasy football and in real football. 14 more of those put up one top 24 season, which, it's good that they did that, but it's kind of a disappointment. If you're drafting in dynasty football, if a receiver's drafted in the first round, you take him in the first round of your rookie drafts, and he puts up one top 24 season for you, you're very, very disappointed, which is why I broke it. I separated these two. That means 92, guys. 92 of the 120 receivers never put up a top 24 season. That's almost 77%. I think it's just below 77%. So you're basically saying if a receiver does not put up, again, this is only first or second round receivers, but I'm sure it's even higher for later rounds. If a receiver in the first or second round does not put up 750 yards in either their first or second season, the odds are extremely high and against them to even go on to put up relevant fantasy seasons. 77% of them never put up a top 24 season. And in my opinion, that's a huge, huge disappointment if you're drafted in the first or second round. We're using a lot of draft capital in our dynasty rookie drafts to take these receivers that are drafted in the first and second round. If you don't put up a top 24 season, that is super, super disappointing. And then of those receivers, so of the 28 that put up a top 24 season, 17 of them actually had top 12 seasons. So that's a pretty good number compared to, of the 28 that went on to put up top 24 seasons. They put up top 12 seasons, 17 of them, which is a solid number. So we're going to kind of look at this today, guys, and just kind of look at some of these, just show you some of these names and then kind of look at receivers that are at risk of falling into this 77%, receivers that were drafted in 2021 and also receivers that were drafted in 2022. And so let's just look at these are the guys, the ones highlighted in light green here. These are all the guys that put up multiple top 24 seasons. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 14 actually only had 2 seasons, which is, I guess, slightly disappointing. Depends where you draft them in your rookie drafts, but it's slightly disappointing if you're only putting up 2 top 24 seasons. You expect these guys to be good for at least 3-4 year stretch. There are some big names on here which are important to point out. Some really, really relevant fantasy guys over the last decade or plus. I mean, Reggie Wayne is a borderline Hall of Famer. He failed to put up 750 yards in either of his first 2 years, and he finished as high as wide receiver 1, and he put up 9 top 24 seasons. Devontae Adams, another guy, obviously been one of the best wide receivers in the league the last 5 years. He didn't even put up 500 yards each of his first 2 seasons. Roddy White, if you guys remember playing fantasy back in the mid to late 2000s, early 2010s, Roddy White was a stud. He finished as a wide receiver 1, I think once, put up 7 top 24 seasons, failed to put up 750 yards. So there's definitely guys here. I mean, Tyler Boyd, he's had a couple nice seasons. Michael Crabtree, Jordy Nelson. There are guys, Demaryius Thomas, another guy. There are guys that break this mold and they come out on top. I think it is interesting to kind of look at the specific situations of some of these. Like a guy like Jordy Nelson and Devontae Adams, they were both at least in their first year. I think for Jordy Nelson, definitely in his second year as well. They were in some pretty crowded wide receiver rooms. I think Jordy Nelson was competing against like Greg Jennings and Donald Driver, who were both really good receivers. Devontae Adams had to go against Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb his first year and maybe his second year, I forget. So there are certain situations where you got to kind of look at the situation. And is it just the receiver going out there and just not putting up the numbers, or is it, they're kind of buried on the depth chart? So it's a little bit of both for these guys. A guy like Vincent Jackson, I remember as a Chargers fan, he was kind of drafted as a project. I think he went to like Northern Colorado or something, so he didn't go to a big name school. There's definitely guys that break this mold. So just because you don't put up 750 yards your first 2 years doesn't mean you can never, doesn't mean you're a failure. You're not going to be good. Now, I do think it's important to kind of note, if you look at a lot of these names, I think the NFL's changes so much, right? Even from the year 2000 and to now, it's changed so much, obviously. I feel like since like the year 2013, 2014, the NFL's kind of changed from what it was in like 2000 to like 2012. You could probably break it down in between there and say it's changed, but that's just kind of in my head from when I really started watching football in the early 2000s to like the early to mid 2010s, more like the mid 2010s. It's really, really changed. And I think one of the things that's changed is when I was younger and playing fantasy football, I remember rookie receivers, you just banked on them not doing anything. You would never draft rookie receivers. They would never do anything. It was very, very rare for you to draft one. You would say, I'll wait till year 2 or 3 even before they're even relevant. And now it's not like that, right? We got guys like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. We've had guys like, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, AJ Green. I feel like they were kind of the earlier receivers in the early 2010s, early mid 2010s that started to kind of break that mold of like, you know what? No, I am a rookie receiver, but I can do well, right? I do think it's interesting to note that a lot of these guys, besides basically like Tyler Boyd and Robert Woods, a lot of these guys were drafted from the 2000s, early 2010s, right? Antonio Bryan, Michael Crabtree, Devontae Adams was drafted, I think, in 2010. Roddy White was the 2000s. Jordy Nelson, Reggie Wayne, Javon Walker, Demaryius Thomas, I think, was 2010. Golden Tate, I think, was 2010. Vincent Jackson was mid-2000s. Santana Moss, mid-2000s. Jerry Porter, mid-2000s. These guys, a lot of these guys that ended up putting up these top seasons, even though they didn't produce their first 2 years, really, it was still in that era of football where receivers weren't really expected to do much their rookie year. And so you gave them more time. You were fine with drafting a guy and him not doing anything for 2 years. Now in the NFL, if a guy doesn't do anything for 2 years, you're like, see ya, whether it's a quarterback, whatever. Like, because, and there's a lot of reasons for this. One, you're paying rookies a lot less than you used to, especially first-round rookies. You used to pay a boatload of money to first. I think like Stafford when he was drafted, or Bradford maybe, had like automatically you had $50 million. So you were invested $50 million from the get-go. You were going to hold on to that guy whether or not he sucked the first 2 years. Now you're investing what, 15 million, 20 million on these rookies, and it's much easier to get out. Another reason I think you see this trend of kind of moving on from guys at a quicker age. I think guys like receivers and quarterbacks, they come into the NFL way more prepared. They're just more prepared. The NFL is as much as it's so much like the college game, more than it's ever been. It's been messing up my words here, but the NFL is more similar to the college game than it has ever been in the history of maybe the NFL. Maybe that's not true, but more than it's ever been in the last 20, 30 years. The NFL is adopting a lot of what's happening in the college, the spread offenses, RPOs, 3 wide receiver sets. In college, you always have 3 or 4 receivers on the field, right? NFL wasn't really like that until recently. So then if you think about it, a guy like Devontae Adams or Jordy Nelson, who's the 3rd wide receiver, they're just not really seeing the field. Whereas if they were in today's NFL, they would see the field a lot more, right? So you get them more opportunity. So there's a lot of reasons, but I do think it's very, very interesting to point out that a lot of these guys that didn't produce their first or second year, they were from that older age of NFL where you give these guys a couple years. You don't really see that now, and there's guys that were drafted since then, that never really panned out. If we kind of just go down the list, you see the guys who've had one top 24 seasons. There's some relevant guys now. Christian Kirk, Cordell Patterson's a little different. Curtis Samuel, Mike Williams. These guys, they could still put up more than one top 24 season, definitely. You look at the guys that didn't put up, and this is what I'm talking about. Will Fuller never had a top 24 season. Mecole Hardman never had a top 24 season. These are guys that were drafted. Kadarius Toney has not had a top 24 season, right? Jalen Reagor. These are guys that are drafted now in kind of the modern NFL, and I don't think they're ever going to put up to. I think there's a good chance, maybe Kadarius Toney, but there's a good chance that a lot of these guys never put up top 24 seasons, because at this point you're kind of like, if you haven't showed me it yet, I don't want to spend my more time. I'm just going to draft someone else. KJ Hamler, another guy. So there's a lot of guys here. If you're just looking at this list, a whole lot of guys that were, Paris Campbell was another modern day receiver where you kind of just cut bait with them if they're not producing, And N'Keal Harry, another one of those guys. Josh Doxson was one of those guys. Dwayne Eskridge, one of those guys. These are guys that are kind of in the modern day NFL where if you haven't produced yet, I'm concerned. Yeah. So when it comes to dynasty football, you need to keep this in mind. You really, really do need to keep this in mind. And the NFL it changes so much. It's what have you done for me lately business. And, some guys I put at the bottom of the list here. I think there's 4 guys, and maybe I missed 1 or 2, but there's 4 guys now that have been in the league for 2 years, have not put up 750 yards. We have Elijah Moore. I'm going to zoom in here so you can see a little better. Elijah Moore has not put up 750 yards. Rashad Bateman, Rondale Moore, Terrace Marshall Jr. These are 4 guys that were either, I think, first. I think they're all second-round picks except for Bateman. I think he was a first-round pick. But these are guys that were drafted in the first or second round that have not put up 750 yards. The odds are very much against them for them to be fantasy relevant. Again, 77% of those guys do not even put up top 24 seasons. Now, Bateman, well, he's been hurt. Yeah, that's part of it. You got to be healthy, right? Availability is one of the best abilities, right? So I understand the argument of Bateman. It's like, well, if he stays healthy, but we got to kind of see him stay healthy at this point. Even Rondale Moore in that sense. Elijah Moore is interesting because he's going to a new team very early on, so he could get that opportunity that maybe the Jets weren't going to give to him. Terrace Marshall is a guy that I'm extremely worried about because he's in the same situation with the Panthers. He's played in 13 and 14 games respectively his first 2 years, so it's not like he's missed a whole lot of time, and he hasn't even put up 500 yards. The odds of Terrace Marshall to being anything are very, very low. And so it's kind of like, do you cut bait with him in Dynasty? Do you just see what you can get? Maybe you can get a third round pick for him and you just kind of cut your losses and take it? Or do you just kind of hold on and hope he turns out? It's really, really hard. But I mean, if you can kind of package him into a deal and upgrade somehow, I think it's smart to do it. And then before we finish this video up, guys, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 receivers that were drafted in 2022 that were rookies last year going into their second year this year that did not put up 750 yards. So these are guys to kind of pay attention to, especially early on in the season. If you don't really see them doing much the first 4 or 5 weeks and you're kind of like, all right, you're not on pace for that 750 yards, you might want to cut loose with them before it's too late. Because by the time that season's done, a guy like Terrace Marshall, maybe if you could have traded him early last year, you could have got something for him because it's like, a second round receiver. maybe it's the same thing for these guys. Now, I will say a couple guys here, Christian Watson, he showed a lot of potential. He went on a good stretch last year. A lot of people are high on him. So I would be very surprised if he doesn't hit that 750-yard threshold. So I'm not cutting loose with Christian Watson necessarily. I think he's going to hit the 750 yards. Jahan Dotson's another guy that I really like. I think he's going to hit the 750 yards if he stays healthy all year. But these other guys, man, Alec Pierce, Treylon Burks, I do have faith in as well to kind of hit that 750. But, guys like Alec Pierce, Sky Moore, Tyquan Thornton, these guys scare me a lot. Wandale, we'll see. He's coming off a major injury. Jameson, he's going to probably fall into this category because he's going to miss 6 weeks. So you're telling me he has to average 75 yards a game, essentially, 75 or 70 yards a game to get to that 750 threshold once he comes back. So he's kind of a little worrisome as well. I still believe in the talents a bit, so we'll see. So there's something to keep in mind, guys. Again, I want to make us better drafters, better fantasy players overall. How do we minimize risks, right? To me, that's all what fantasy football is about. It's impossible to predict everything. You're going to get things wrong. Even the experts are going to get half of what they say wrong with their projections. So how do we minimize these risks? And to me, getting out on these guys like a Terrace Marshall Jr. And seeing what, even if it's a 3rd-round pick, I think that holds more value than what he does. I understand if you want to hold on, if you drafted him in the 1st round and you want to hold on just to see if you ever get your value back. But sometimes it's best to the sunken cost, right? So that's kind of all I have for you guys today. I think we're going to do another video looking at Nick Chubb here soon. I'm very intrigued by Nick Chubb this year. So yeah, I appreciate everything, guys. If you could, again, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Catch you guys all